Super. So what I thought I'd do today, everyone, is I thought I'd talk a little bit about my background first. So I may ask for your indulgence while I share a little bit about where I come from and how I got here in the United Kingdom. I'm originally not British, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a sec. And then I'll talk about my training and how I became a clinical psychologist, and then talk to you about how to become one, and then spend a little time talking about some of the research I've done and some of the research I'm doing right now. Okay, so I thought I'd just pop up a little map. As you can see, we've got the UK and Ireland there on the right, and over on the left, you can see the province of Newfoundland and Labrador on the east coast of Canada. And just up to the north, which you can't see on the map, is obviously Greenland. And then you've got Iceland, and then you've got Ireland and the UK. And then you just see a little snip of Prince Edward Island and a little snip of Nova Scotia. So I was born here and raised there in that little circle in Bonavista Bay and on the island of Newfoundland. And the island's called Newfoundland and the province is called Newfoundland and Labrador. And then in 1997, I got on a plane and I came to London to finish my training. And I never left. So I've been here for quite a while. But what I thought I'd do is just give you a little bit of imagery from home in Newfoundland. So I'm just going to play a very short video, only lasts a minute, but I'll just give you some imagery of what the province is like and how it looks. And there's a little poem along the way. So that's just a little tourist video. Can I just ask, could you hear the sound?
No, the sound wasn't.
Nah.
No sound?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, that's a shame. I'm so sorry about that. I did wonder if it wasn't going to work. So anyway, just some imagery from home where I grew up. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about it first, if that's all right. So Newfoundland and Labrador, first discovered by the Europeans, probably around 1000. And those were the Vikings. So on the northern peninsula on the island is a place called Lonesome Meadows, where it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, where we have clear evidence of homes built by the Vikings, Norwegians predominantly, Scandinavians, where they probably traveled out of Scandinavia along to Iceland, down to Greenland, onto Labrador, and then on to the island of Newfoundland. So from that time, predominantly unsettled by the Europeans, by people from Europe, and the Vikings didn't remain, I should say. So as far as we know, they didn't stay around. But then in 1497, John Cabot, on behalf of Henry VII, set sail from England and discovered Newfoundland in 1497. And people from Bristol will recognize the ship called the Matthew because they're familiar with that story because it's inherently connected to the city of Bristol. But Elizabeth I, it didn't formally the British didn't formally take possession of the island until 1593, and that was Elizabeth I, and then Newfoundland was a colony up until 1907, until we were given the status of a dominion with self-government. The indigenous or Aboriginal population of Newfoundland and Labrador on the island, it was the Beothuk. Unfortunately, they have all died out. There are no more, and that was predominantly as a consequence of migration from Europe, bringing diseases, and also settling on their land. So unfortunately, there are no more Beothuk. But there are other Aborigine populations, including the Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit. Some of you will obviously know and be familiar with some of those communities. And we were a separate country. We were not part of Canada until 1949. And there were two referendums held after the Second World War as to what should happen. And the first vote went against joining Canada, and the second one was for Canada. So Newfoundland and Labrador became, the people of Newfoundland and Labrador became a Canadian in 1949, and the result was 52% for joining Canada. So just to say, my dad was not born a Canadian, he was born a Newfoundland citizen, and many of the institutions in Newfoundland are prefixed by the word royal, but it's not Royal Canadian, it's Royal Newfoundland, recognizing the fact that we were not part of Canada for the majority of our history. So the capital of the city is a city called St. John's. It is the oldest city in North America, and there is only a single university called Memorial University of Newfoundland. It's a big place, so in terms of kilometers squared, it's just over 405,000. You compare that to the United Kingdom at 242. It's quite a large place, but it has a very small population of just 500,000. And up until 1980, our flag was the same as the Union flag of the United Kingdom. And in 1980, they changed it to this. And you might notice it looks quite similar to the Union flag in design. So in terms of immigration to Newfoundland, a lot of the European settlers came from the West Country, including Dorset, Devon, Cornwall, and Bristol. And quite a large population also came from Ireland, including Wexford, Waterford, Kerry, and Cork, if you're familiar with Ireland. And one of the things that drove immigration to Newfoundland was fish, with cod fishery. And there were lots of companies set up. And so the Job Brothers is an example of that ran schooners out of Teignmouth in the West Country, back and forth ferrying fish from Newfoundland back to the United Kingdom. And there is a large Irish population, and we have a flag that's been around for a long time, which looks suspiciously similar to the Irish flag, and has very much been adopted as the flag of what would have been or could have been the Republic of Newfoundland. So some people mistake me for Irish from time to time because of my accent and the way I talk. I'm not Irish, I'm from Newfoundland, and there are similarities with both the Irish and the West Country accent. So in terms of my background, I graduated high school in Newfoundland and then studied psychology at Memorial University of Newfoundland, where I graduated with a Bachelor of Science honours degree with an interest in neuroscience. And I didn't think about or didn't really consider becoming a clinical psychologist, to be honest. I thought I'd pursue a career in the basic sciences, looking at neuroscience and studying neurosciences, or I thought I might study medicine. However, Memorial University's very first Vice Chancellor was Lord Rothermere, not the current Lord Rothermere, but going back in time a little bit. He was the first Chancellor, and as a consequence of that, established a postgraduate fellowship for graduates of Memorial University to do postgraduate training in Britain. So this still exists today and is awarded annually to undergraduates who successfully complete an undergraduate program at the university. And I was awarded one of these fellowships, which meant I could come to Britain and all my fees were paid, and I was given a stipend to live on to study and do postgraduate work of some sort. So I did think that I would do a PhD in neuroscience at the time. I had an interest in mental health, and I explored and spoken to some potential PhD supervisors, but decided not to do that. And just to show you, this is the city of St. John's, which I just spoke about, where Memorial University is located. And yes, it is that colorful. That's the basilica there, which is a Roman Catholic basilica, and that's just the harbour overlooking downtown. looking on the sea. And this is Signal Hill, which overlooks the neck of the harbour, the entrance to the city with the cannons. And this is the Cabot Tower, which is the tower on there on Signal Hill, where Marconi sent the first transatlantic wireless signal back to Britain. And this was very much a fort fortified against the French and others. So I chose to study clinical psychology at King's College at the Institute of Psychiatry, which is now known as the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience. Once I qualified as a clinical psychologist, I got my first job working with people with learning disabilities in an inpatient hospital. So it's a mental health hospital in Norfolk in East Anglia on the east coast of England. And having taken that job, I noticed a job advert, and that was for clinical lecturers to join Norwich Medical School at the University of East Anglia, which was then brand new and was just opening and was taking their first intake. So I applied for that job and got it. So that was the beginning of my clinical academic career. And when I say clinical academic, what I mean by that is somebody who works as a clinician in the NHS, but also works at a university undertaking research and teaching and training. So I worked at the University of East Anglia in Norwich for about 13 years on a clinical psychology training program there, training clinical psychologists to work in the NHS. So during the beginning of my career, the National Institute for Health Research and NIHR, the National Institute for Health and Care Research, I should say, is a major funder of health-related research in the United Kingdom. They launched a fellowship training scheme for health professionals who could do a research PhD. And I applied for this and I was successful. So I did another doctorate. So I did a research PhD at the University of Kent. And so I did that while remaining employed at the University of East Anglia and living in Norwich, and finished that PhD, and then applied for something called an NIHR postdoctoral fellowship, and again was successful. And when you do a PhD at a university, which is a research PhD, you focus for 3 years on your topic, and you publish papers, and you develop your studies, and you hopefully find out something new. And then following that, we often undertake a period of training called a postdoc, and that means after your doctoral degree. And that's a further focused period of training and inquiry in research. So I did that after I did my PhD, and that was funded by the National Institute for Health Research. And my PhD and my postdoc was very much about the application and understanding of models from developmental psychology to the treatment of mental health problems, criminal offending behavior amongst people with developmental disabilities, such as learning disabilities or autism. And that's very much what I was doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. So I then got offered a job at the University of Kent, and I continued to work for the NHS, as I still do today. And I took that job at Kent, and while I was at the University of Kent, I was promoted to professor. And then after a few years there, an opportunity came up in the Midlands, where I work now, and I moved to the University of Warwick. And I work now within what is a research-only centre. So we do not offer any undergraduate degrees in what's called CEDAR, which is where I work. But we do have PhD students, and we provide postgraduate training for PhD students. And we are a research centre at Warwick, which is focused solely on high quality research involving people with learning disabilities and or autism within education, social care and or health. And shortly after joining Warwick, I joined Herefordshire and Worcestershire Health and Care NHS Trust, where I am their honorary associate director for research, where I have responsibility for helping that NHS Trust embed research into the trust in terms of health and everything we provide. But I also work as a clinician within Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust. And I am what's called a responsible clinician, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. And I work within low secure services for autistic men. And what that means is I work in a psychiatric hospital, but I work in secure services. So our ward or our unit is secure, and we provide services for men with autism who are detained under the Mental Health Act, who unfortunately, for whatever reason, have found themselves in trouble with the police. And the court has ordered them that they have to stay in hospital for treatment. So are there any questions about any of that before I go on to talk about how to become a clinical psychologist?
So, like, did you have to pay for
Did I
any
have
of this?
Did I have to? No. Well, I had to pay for my undergraduate degree. So I'll share what happened in Canada. So when I started as a university student in the 90s, my tuition fees, I think for my first year were something like, I don't know, $500, $750, $750, something like that. So they weren't particularly expensive. So I think I was about to say in British money, that would have been about £250. It's probably £25 million now, considering how the pound has gone. But it's not it's not particularly expensive. By the time I finished my undergraduate degree, my tuition fees skyrocketed. They were probably thousands of dollars. And the government got rid of grants and brought in student loans, which was all a little bit challenging and difficult for us. So I ended up graduating as undergraduate with a lot of debt, which I wasn't very happy about. And I appreciate that you guys are likely to be faced with some of this as you undertake your undergraduate career at a British university in the future, and I have sympathy for you. However, one of the things that happened to the student loan system in Canada some years ago is that it did go bust. So the government had to buy back all the debt and reinvent itself a little bit. So grants have been brought back for some provinces, and things have been made a bit more accessible and cheaper. I'm hoping that someday, perhaps in Britain, it may go in the same way, but we'll see what happens. So certainly from an undergraduate degree, absolutely. For my postgraduate degree in clinical psychology training, no. And you won't have to either if you do postgraduate training in clinical psychology. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I didn't have to pay for my PhD. And the reason for that was because it was funded by the National Institute for Health Research. After your undergraduate degree, if you want to do a PhD, you can find funded PhD courses. So there are, Warwick has plenty. All British universities will advertise them. There are often, they're funded by a fellowship or a scheme, and you get paid some money to live on, but your tuition fees are paid. Not all PhDs are like that. You can also self-fund, so you can pay yourself if you want. That's available to students. But there are certainly funded PhD fellowships and stipends which are available. Clinical psychology training is a little bit different, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But if you want to be a clinical psychologist, you do have to complete, in the first instance, get onto a university course that is accredited by the British Psychological Society. And it has to be accredited, so it has to be an accredited course. So can you see my screen, guys? I've just put a web browser up.
No.
No. All right. Sorry, I'll fix that because I was just sharing not sharing the whole screen, but sharing my. Now you can see it, hopefully. There you go. So the link that was on my slide, which you can see there, I just clicked to open that up. So the British Psychological Society, you can go in, and if you're thinking about applying to undergraduate courses, you want to check to make sure they're accredited. I'm sure they'll tell you, but if I just quickly bung in Warwick, I can see that the BSc in psychology at the University of Warwick is indeed accredited, and it means you're eligible for something called the graduate basis for chartered membership. It was changed from GBR. The BPS have that. So if you want to do clinical psychology training, you need an undergraduate degree that confers GBC, as it's called now. And it says here, it's only if you do this module at Warwick, and what that is your dissertation, so a research dissertation at the end. If you don't do that, you don't get GBC, so it's important that you do that. And you can search any course in the country, so Birmingham will certainly be there, and you can see the accredited different types of psychology degrees that Birmingham offer and that they're accredited. So these previously accredited ones would have been previous degrees that are perhaps no longer offered by the university, so they're now defunct, but they're still listed there. Okay. So if you want to be a clinical psychologist, the first thing you need to do is do an undergraduate degree in psychology that is accredited by the British Psychological Society. After doing that, you do need to then gain some relevant experience to try to gain access to a funded clinical psychology training place. And in order to do that, what a lot of graduates will do is get jobs as assistant psychologists in the National Health Service. They are paid positions, substantive posts. You get paid a salary, or research assistants, again, that are paid. Both of those are great. Some will find other relevant care-related experience working as a healthcare assistant or a nursing assistant or some other caring role, but you do need to gain some experience to be able to then make yourself look attractive to clinical psychology training places, because they are quite competitive, and they are a 3-year doctoral training program. You do apply for clearing, and I'll just show you the clearinghouse for clinical psychology training, just like you do for an undergraduate degree. So this is for postgraduate training in the United Kingdom on this website, and you can see all the stuff here, and find out about all the university courses, and you can see a list of all the courses in the United Kingdom that you'll find here. So the one that I did is this one at King's. So it tells you there that you need a minimum of a 2-1 in psychology, and has to confer GBC, which I was just talking about. And they say you need at least 6 months full-time relevant clinical experience or employment. So that's what I was talking about, that you need to gain some relevant experience past your undergraduate degree. So there's one clinical psychology training program in the United Kingdom, or in England, the University of Hull, which doesn't use clearing. And there is a reason for that. So here, Hull has a slightly different route. That's the only one who does it. They have what's called a fast track entry. So you can go straight from your undergraduate degree straight on to applying for the doctorate. So they select their intake from their current undergraduates at the University of Hull. Okay, there's quite a few, quite a few clinical psychology training programs in Britain. So there's one at Coventry and Warwick, the University of Warwick, where I work. But there's also at Birmingham, but there's also others around the country. You can see there's a big list of them, so all available here, and you can read all about them, whatever you want to, find out.
What's that website called?
So that's www.clearinghouse-house.org.uk. Okay, I'll open that again, and what I'll do is I'll pop that, copy that, and I'll pop it in the chat for you so you can see it. Okay, all right, there you go. Okay, so the thing about clinical psychology training is that it is a paid job. So while you are a trainee, you are also an NHS member of staff. So you are paid at what's called salary band 6, and that's called the Gender for Change band 6, which in Gender for Change is the salary scale and the name of the salary scale, guys. So you would join at band 6 at what is currently 33,000 a year for 3 years. Okay, when you qualify and you get a job in the NHS, if you work for the NHS, you then start the band up on band 7, and that is £41,000. And then there's increasing pay with increasing seniority. So there's band 7, then there's band 8, and there's 8B, C, and D. So within that band, and each band is associated with greater salary or remuneration. So, and then there's band 9, which is the highest pay band in the NHS at the moment. Okay, so that's how that works. So I should say a doctorate in clinical psychology is not a PhD. You are expected to do and undertake clinical work while you're training. So you have to rotate and do placements every 6 months. Some allow you to do 4-month ones, depending on the program, but you are expected to complete clinical work and clinical placements and pass each one successfully, and you are examined. So you have to do training in adult mental health, child and adolescent mental health, learning disabilities, older people's mental health, neuropsychology, it should say they're not neuropsychological, forensic mental health, and there are other specialities. And some courses allow you to choose specialities as you get towards the end of your training program. There might be particular things that you're interested in developing in terms of your career and jobs that you might want to take. At the same time, you need to undertake doctoral level research project and submit a thesis for examination at the end of the program. And along the way, there's a large taught component. So you are taught things in classroom at the same time as you're doing your clinical work in the NHS, at the same time as you're doing your research. So it's quite a hefty, pretty intensive training program over 3 years, guys. Okay. As I said, it is competitive, and some people who want to go into training will do their undergraduate degree and then do another degree, a postgraduate, a master's degree, for example, and some will do a PhD, a research-only PhD, guys, which doesn't involve a clinical component, but it may be in a clinically related field. So they'll do a Doctor of Philosophy degree, doing research studies in mental health or something related to mental health or health more broadly. And if you do a PhD before you apply to clinical psychology training, that is, of course, an advantage because you've already demonstrated competence in research, and that will be looked upon very favorably. I'm not suggesting you have to. Courses don't require you to, but that is there. And to successfully pass and become a clinical psychologist, you need to demonstrate demonstrate competence in both clinical work and research. Becoming a psychologist, so a clinical psychologist is a regulated profession, so we are regulated by the Health and Care Professions Council. The word clinical psychologist is protected in law, so only a registered someone who's registered with the HCPC who can call themselves a clinical psychologist. Just so you know, the word psychologist is not regulated in law, so technically anyone could call themselves a psychologist, but clinical psychologist, forensic psychologist, sport and exercise psychologist, educational psychologist, occupational psychologist, which are all different types of psychologists and have slightly different training routes, are protected titles in law. And there is the National Career Service, which doesn't want to open. There you go, which you can visit, and it tells you a little bit about different psychologists and how to become one, which you can find out and what you need, and it is very much what I've just told you. But yeah, there are other related programs and new initiatives that have been developed in terms of staffing the NHS. So you can, for example, do an undergraduate degree, and there are some undergraduate degree programs in Britain that have a 4th year, which will allow you to train to become a psychological well-being practitioner, which is a particular job role in something called IAPT, which is the Improving Access to Psychological Therapies program in the NHS. And psychological well-being practitioners work in the NHS and offer manualized specific types of psychological therapies for people with particular types of mental health problems. And that you can do having done a year's extra training and go on to work in that to then work in what are called the well-being or IAP service, depending on what your local NHS trust calls it. If you were to do that and then work for a year, that would count as relevant clinical experience to position yourself to be able to then become a clinical psychologist. Are there any questions about that, everyone? No? Okay.
So just a question in the chat.
Oh, was there? Sorry, I missed that, guys.
How difficult is it to increase band? So I think he means by pay.
I wouldn't say it's markedly difficult. So, you know, everyone will start out at band 7, at least for work as a band 7 for a year and a bit, maybe 2 years. You may have to change jobs to find a higher band, for example, but that can happen. I wouldn't say it's terribly difficult, but it can be difficult. But, you know, you might be at band 8A and there's a band 8B job that comes up in your trust and you can apply for it and get that job and then move up a band. So yeah, you can shift between the bands. Okay. Was there someone else who was about to ask a question?
Yeah, so from you getting into uni to becoming a clinical psychologist, how long would that take?
So the absolute minimum would be perhaps at Hull, where it would take 6 years. But reality, it's probably going to take about 7 or 8 years, okay, with work experience and that sort of thing after your undergraduate degree. So I'd probably tell you, so I did an undergraduate degree at Memorial, and our undergraduate degree programs were 4 years. So that was 4 years at undergrad. Then I did a 3-year clinical psychology doctorate, having worked for a little bit as well. So, and then I did a PhD. So all in all, I think I was in university studying for about a decade of my life, guys. So just so you know, it can take a little while. Any questions about that? Okay, so as a psychologist, you will not prescribe medication, just so you're aware, but you will certainly get involved in decisions about medication within a multidisciplinary team working alongside a psychiatrist. So clinical psychologists are eligible to become what's called an approved clinician. So this is a particular role defined in the Mental Health Act in England and Wales. So an approved clinician is eligible to become a patient's responsible clinician, and you therefore have responsibility for a patient detained under the Mental Health Act or subject to sections of the Mental Health Act. So you have legal responsibility for that patient. So that has particular additional legal and statutory responsibilities which come with the role. So I do that job. So I am a responsible clinician, and as a consequence, have legal responsibility for patients in the NHS. That's a role that's traditionally been one that was done by psychiatry, but the role has been broadened to allow other professions, not just. I see it says the call is ending in 9 minutes. I just wanted to check. That's okay.
I'll be putting a link in soon into the chat.
Okay. All right, great. So as I said when I was chatting about my experience, I originally thought I would perhaps pursue a career in neuroscience, and this is some of the work I was doing when I was a bit younger. So I put the name of my undergraduate thesis up there, guys, which was finasteride fails to affect the sexual differentiation of the most posterior and dorsal portion of the medial amygdala. I don't know if you have done much anatomy, neuroanatomy, but the amygdala is obviously part of the limbic system in your brain, traditionally thought to be very important in our experiences of emotion and regulating emotion. And finasteride is a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, which is a particular enzyme that's quite important for boys. So it is the enzyme that's responsible for converting testosterone into something called DHT. So, and that's the more potent version of testosterone. So during gestation, when we're developing, that is responsible for converting a fetus into a male fetus. So finasteride blocks that conversion of testosterone, and we were looking at how that may affect when we block that, how that may affect the sexual differentiation of the most posterior and dorsal portion of the medial amygdala. I should say we weren't doing this in humans. This was animal work, so we were doing this in rats. So we're looking at how that affects the sexual differentiation of the brain. So we also did some work around olfactory learning. So this is our memory for smells and odors. So again, rats have very big olfactory bulbs. They're huge compared to the rest of the brain. So they learn smells very easily, and smell and scent is something that's very important to the mammalian rat brain. And one of the things that happens when baby rats are born is they will bond to or attach to their mum, and they very quickly learn the odor of their mum. So we were disrupting, if you will, aspects of serotonergic projections into the olfactory bulb, which develop. And what I mean by that is axons, which I hope you've learned about in terms of nerves. So those myelin sheaths, they're covered in myelin sheaths. The electrical signal, as channels open, that the electrical signal travels down that axon, releasing neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft, activating another axon, and the electrical signals pulses around the brain, shall we say. So we were disrupting some of that to help understand what are called second messenger systems inside the cell in terms of how they affect protein expression on the cell wall. And we were, as it says there in the title of that paper, increased beta-adrenal receptor activation overcomes conditional olfactory learning deficit. So we were, increasing the activation of the beta-adrenal receptors and seeing how that helps to overcome a depletion of serotonin in the olfactory bulb, allowing these rats to still learn. And what we were doing, just for fun, was we were pretending we were the baby rats' mums. So we were used a paintbrush to stroke the little baby rats with a paintbrush, very soft paintbrush, mimicking, if you will, mum licking and cleaning the baby rats, while we exposed them to the scent of peppermint. So we got them to really like peppermint is what we were up to, which sounds a bit fun, but as a consequence of that, we were able to then do some work to remove the brain, do some slices and see what was going on in terms of the effect we were having on how the brain developed. Okay. So that was kind of what I was doing. And then I sort of moved on then into mental health much more. So I became a clinical psychology trainee, and I was much more interested in what was going on. And I work in forensic mental health care. So I work with individuals who've been arrested and detained under the Mental Health Act. So beginning to look at how ward environments have an impact upon progress through care pathways and how that has an effect on patients, looking at what's going on in terms of people who have a tendency to come in and out of psychiatric hospitals frequently, and beginning to look at concepts such as locus of control and people who have been convicted of particular types of criminal offences. So in terms of my research, I'm predominantly focused on mental health, and I'm interested in mental health, and specifically I'm interested in people with learning disabilities and autism, but also do research involving young people who are not necessarily those who have learning disabilities or autism. And I'm particularly interested in our understanding of how mental health problems develop amongst these groups, how they're maintained, and then developing interventions to try to help with those mental health problems and testing out those interventions. Also, I've been interested in education and methods for teaching certain groups of people more effectively. And a lot of the work we do in clinical psychology with patients, shall I say, involves teaching people new skills or new skill sets, and that involves an element of education. So there's a bit of overlap to how you guys learn in the classroom and what we might be doing in a clinic, for example. So some of my PhD students at the minute are looking at methods to effectively teach people who may have difficulties with learning, using more effective methods to help them acquire the skills that they need. So some of the things that I do. So this is some work, and these are papers, guys, that have been published in peer-reviewed journals. So I don't know how much you know about that, but certainly when we do science, and you've probably been exposed to it. So we do science, we write up our study, we submit it to a peer-reviewed journal for publication, and it gets sent out. When you send it in to colleagues, people sometimes you don't get to know who they are, who review your work and send you comments and tell you sometimes that your work's a bit rubbish and you need to make it better, but they're meant to make helpful comments on your work and make suggestions to help improve what you're doing. So these are papers that are published in journals available for download on the internet, but they've been through that process, so they've been through peer review. So this was some work that one of my PhD students, Beverly Garrigan, did, and she completed her PhD and has moved on to bigger and better things. But we were very much, and I have an interest in understanding moral development and our understanding of morality and whether or not a behavior is right or wrong, how that develops and how that occurs and how we make those judgments. So I just want to check, do I need to join
sorry, I'll put the link in now into the chat. Can we just
chat
join now?
link just yet, guys? Or are we okay?
I've put the link into the chat.
All good. Are you still there?
I've put the link into the chat.
Okay. Do we need to join that now?
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
Okay. I'll jump over real quick.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm on mute. Thanks for clocking that for me. I do beg your pardon. So thanks, everyone. So what I was just saying was I was just talking about morality and moral development specifically. And moral decision making is, if you will, the cognitive and affective processes that occur within us when we're making a decision or judging, if you will, an act in terms of whether or not it could be seen as a good or not so good act. And it changes as we develop. So our understanding of morality is very different when we're children compared to when we're teenagers, compared to when we're adults. And you guys, I assume, are all teenagers, right?
Yep.
I think that's a yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah, great. So let me ask you a question. So let me just ask you, how important is it for people to obey the law? Is that not important, just important, or very important, guys? What would you say?
I mean, it's pretty important because it's the law in it. Like, if you don't obey the law, you can get arrested and put in jail.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So it's very important. We're going to say that. So I was just about to ask, why is it very important? So you gave me an answer. So it's very important because you could get arrested and put in jail. Anyone else want to have stab? Tell me why it's important for people to obey the law. Why is it very important?
I think Ishan wants to
So that
Ishan wants to go.
oh yeah, thanks. So that disorder and chaos isn't created, so that
Great.
things remain in
Yeah,
order.
great. Remains in order. Yep. Any other reasons then? Can anyone think of another reason?
I mean, most laws are just like not a common sense, but they just make life a bit better for everyone else.
Yeah. So we'll take those three answers, guys, and we'll think about the content. So we've got sort of, a bit about the consequences of breaking the law. So could get arrested and go to jail, so that you're appealing to the consequences of the act. Then you've got something about chaos and something about order. So you're thinking then a little bit more about the impact on us together, okay? And then a little bit more almost creeping into some, you didn't quite say it, but some sort of reference to society. So if we think about laws, fundamentally, they are there to bring about a sense of community cohesion. They're fundamental to how society operates and is ordered. They're fundamental, but there are other ways of thinking about it. So if you are somebody who's going around breaking the law, you can think about, well, what does that say about your character as a person? So how does that reflect upon you? Do you see what I mean? So there's lots of judgments or reasons that we can give as to why someone could break the law or may break the law. So, and our justifications for that you guys have just been doing, change with time. So as we grow up. So sometimes, for example, when you've been to university and after you've gone on and done that, some people, for example, will provide philosophical or utilitarian, and I don't know how much you know about utilitarianism, but they will give very complex reasons or rationales for, related to our understanding of why an act is right or wrong. Little kids, we're talking about 5, 6, 7-year-olds might say, oh, my mum will be upset with me, or daddy will, take away my Xbox, that sort of thing. Directly appealing to the physical consequence of the act, sort of right there in front of them in person. Whereas others will perspective take and think about the impact, not just on themselves, but on other people. Others will perspective take and think about what's going on in terms of society. Okay. So what we know about decision-making in the moral domain is that actually it does vary depending on people's history. It occurs and develops as a consequence of the experiences we have growing up. It also is related to what happens in terms of our parenting experiences. So, and there is a relationship with, the quality of your education, your socioeconomic status. There's lots of factors that contribute to this. Okay, guys? So one of the things we know is that young offenders, so people like yourselves who perhaps may be committing crimes, we know that their moral development, for example, their moral reasoning ability may lag a little bit. So it may actually lag a little bit compared to others. And so their justifications for why they may or may not break the law may look different and may sound different from those who don't. Okay. And that's quite interesting. And that tells us something about and that's related, and that very much tells us about something about their psychology, shall we say. So you think, well, what if we could spur on development? What if we could get them thinking about the consequences of their act in a slightly different way? Bang, we've got an intervention. Could we teach them that? Could we help with that? So that is something that I've been interested in and something that we've been doing. So one of the things that Bev was looking at is trying to understand how moral development has an impact upon decision making. And what we've got here is a model that we published explaining how decision making happens in the moral domain. So there are a series of steps here. There are 6 of them, and they're affected by the middle bit of the circle, which includes brain development, affect or emotional processes, social factors, and our past experience, our database, shall we call it. So if you think about, you go into a social situation with someone else, you've got to encode what's going on really rapidly. Your brain's got to think what's happening, what's going on. And then from that, we've got to interpret those cues and interpret that information and make a series of judgments and evaluations about it. And that includes things like perspective taking or theory of mind. And that's all about your ability to adopt the perspective of another person, to see something from another person's point of view. So we also call that theory of mind. And we've got to evaluate all of that and think about what's going on, then clarify what are we going to do? What do we want out of this situation? And that requires complex cognition, so abstract thought. And then very quickly, we've got to access what responses can we do, and we've got to make a decision, and then we've got to enact our behavior. Now that doesn't quite happen in that way. We don't sit down and with a piece of paper and sort of fill out a form. Okay, what am I going to do now? And then I'm going to do this next. It doesn't quite happen like that. It happens real quick. It's quite fast, and sometimes it's driven by your guts. And what I mean by that is how you feel. So affective states are very important in decision making. So they can often trigger a particular type of behavior in a particular situation. You get really cross and really angry, I can guarantee the behavior you exhibit is going to be very different from when you're calm, considered, and have had time to think about things. So what we do know is that certainly young offenders and and young adults who commit crimes, they go through this process in a slightly different way. And what I've got here on the right is just some work that we did around areas of the brain that light up or involved in terms of moral evaluation. So this is when we're judging someone else's behavior. So I'm making a moral judgment of you. And then we've got moral response decision clusters, which is that when I'm making the decision myself. Someone's raised their hand, Ishmael.
Yeah, so it seems like psychology is a lot of biology? Like lot.
It can be. It absolutely can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. Okay. So there are people who work in the social domain within psychology, are interested in family systems and whatnot. So they may not do much biology. So as I say, a lot of what I do isn't biology. And I can show you that, for example. So if I look at my next slide, so what we're doing here is not necessarily biology, but of course it's related to biology. So these are just some other papers that we published. So the PASA trial, which was a randomized control trial, so an experiment testing cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety disorders in people with Asperger's syndrome or autism. And then the development and validation of the modified multiple Aaron's test for adults with learning disabilities. This is neuropsychology. So this is an in vivo or sort of actual task that we get people to do to test, if you will, their reasoning skills and what's going on. And then we've got a couple of systematic reviews and meta-analyses. I don't know if you know what meta-analyses are, guys. Have you ever heard that before?
I don't think so.
Don't think so? No?
No, I haven't. Yeah.
No? Okay, that's all right. So meta-analysis is a particular statistical technique that we use to work out whether or not an intervention of any type is efficacious or is effective. So whether or not it works. So if you think about, we've got something we're going to do to people to test out whether or not it makes them better, okay, in some way. So that could be in mental health. It could also be in medicine. So it could be a particular drug, could be a particular surgical technique. It doesn't just have to be psychology and mental health. It could be also a public health intervention, like rolling out a vaccine for COVID across the country. So it could be something like that. So we get lots of different research groups around the world doing research studies on interventions. So if we take cognitive behavioral therapy, which these are both about. So one is psychological therapy, which is a bit broader than cognitive therapy. The other one is CBT for people with autistic people. So if we take cognitive behavioral therapy, you've got psychologists in the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Africa, India, Russia, Belgium, all over the world doing science, doing studies and publishing research about cognitive behavioral therapy and whether or not it works with a particular group. So what you can do is you can collect up all those studies, published in peer-reviewed journals. You can collect up all those studies and you can extract the data, the actual data from the papers, how people scored before they got the treatment and how people scored after they got the treatment. And I can get that from hundreds of studies involving thousands and thousands of participants. And what meta-analysis is a way of integrating the findings from across all those studies. So all those papers, putting them together in a single paper to work out, does this treatment work? So rather than one group, for example, testing an intervention on just a few hundred people, we can integrate all the findings across countries to, end up with perhaps a sample size of 30,000 participants. So then we can then look at that, analyze that data to work out, is there evidence that this actually works in the way intended? Okay, so that's what these two meta-analyses were doing. They're looking at whether or not psychological therapies for these particular populations were actually effective. Okay, so that's called meta-analysis. So another thing that, and remember I mentioned a minute ago about encoding and encoding. So one of the things we've got to do is when we go into a social situation with people, we've got to, our brains very quickly, boom, bang, work out what's going on. We encode everything that's going on. Your brain is very, very, very fun when it comes to encoding information. It's a bit biased, guys. All of us are a bit different. We all have previous experiences. Anybody afraid of spiders, guys, on the call? Really scared of spiders? Yeah, really scared of spiders. So if there was a spider around you and you were in a room with a lot of people who weren't scared of spiders, I'm pretty sure your brain's going to see the spider before anyone else's. You're going to be biased towards detecting spiders because you're afraid of them. You're going to be on threat alert for spiders, okay? So there is a particular experiment, a methodology, a paradigm, we would say, that we use in cognitive psychology to work out what we call attentional bias. And that is your brain will automatically allocate your attention to something without you even to think about it. You will just go there. You will see it. Okay. And we're full of attentional biases, guys. And we know that attentional bias is important in mental health problems. So we know, for example, that people who suffer from low mood or who have anxiety disorders will code social information differently. So they will, their attention will be allocated to in social situations in a different way to those folks who don't have it. So what I've got here is just a very quick thing I found on YouTube, which basically involves presenting two words. I'm going to pause real quick. So I've got two words. I've got song on the left. I've got the word idiot on the right. So what we do in what's called a dot probe paradigm is we're trying to work out if somebody has an intentional bias for a particular word or a cluster or theme of words or pictures or images. Instead of putting words on a computer screen, what I can do is put pictures on a computer screen so you don't have to read the words. So guess what? Some people can't read very well, but they can process images pretty well. So if I were to run a little experiment, and this was my experiment, and I've got two words flash up on a computer screen with you, and in front of you, you've got a button box, and I've actually got one behind me, which I can show you, which we plug into the computer, and this is just a button box with a series of buttons, and you can see there's a button here and a button here. And what you would do is these two words would flash up really fast, milliseconds. So we might put them on the screen for 300 milliseconds. So you just barely see them. If you blink, you'd miss them. So they're going to stay on the screen a little bit longer in this video. So they appear and then they disappear. And then you saw an asterisk pop up. And your job would be, if the asterisk's on the left, push the left button. That's all you got to do. Ignore everything else. Your job is just find the asterisk and push the button. So we get some more words appear. Asterisk appears on the right, push the right button. Two more words appear. It's on the right again, push the right button. Two more words appear. Oh, now they're on the left, push the left button. Your job is just to push buttons, push buttons, push buttons, push buttons. You're not doing anything else. So over time, what will happen and what we can work out is because your brain automatically allocates attention to particular types of words, depending on your past experiences. So if you had an anxiety disorder and you were quite an anxious person, and I had anxiety related words on that being flashed up for milliseconds, so very barely perceivable, your brain's likely to allocate its attentional resources towards the anxious word. So if the anxious word is on the right and your job is to push, and the asterisk appears on the left, your brain has automatically already allocated your attention to the right. But you've then got to reorient your attention to focus on the asterisk on the left and press the button on the left. That takes you just that little bit longer. It's milliseconds, but it takes you longer. If, however, you've got an attentional bias towards anxious words, and you look to the right, and my asterisk's on the right, and I'm asking you to press that right button, your attention automatically has already been allocated to the right. Guess what? You're faster at pushing that button now because I want you to push the right button. So I can then do my maths and work out your attentional bias based on hundreds of trials where I get you to push buttons and respond to buttons. So we've done this work, and we've done this work using images, and this is a research paper published in a journal called Aggressive Behavior, where we presented, use what this is called the dot probe task, using pictures rather than words, to men with learning disabilities who've committed crimes and men with learning disabilities who had no history of crimes. And what we saw was those with a history of engaging in criminal offending behavior had an attentional bias towards affectively laden pictures. So negative and positive. whereas people without that history didn't have that attentional bias. So you can see what's going on here. So their brains are allocating their attention automatically. Now, that's really interesting because I could work out an intervention. Could I undo that? Could I get rid of that attentional bias? And if I could, does that mean you're coding information in social situations differently? And if that's the case, does that then have an impact upon your risk of committing crimes in the future? We don't know. But also in mental health, we do know, certainly for children, adolescents, and adults, attentional bias modification, which is an intervention which does exist, does actually undo attentional bias towards, mood-related words, for example, which does actually lead to a lift in some of the symptoms associated with mental health problems. So just by doing a computer task like that, we can retrain your brain to process, retrain your brain to undo, if you will, attentional bias. And that's really exciting. And I think that's really exciting. So, and we can do it with pictures. And when we can do it with pictures, that's really helpful for people who may have learning disabilities, who may struggle to read words. So one of my PhD students at the moment is doing a project just like that. So this is just some more recent work that we've been doing. We're also interested in mental imagery and how that may relate to psychological therapies and how that can be incorporated into psychological therapies for people with learning disabilities. And we've got some projects running in Nigeria, in Africa at the minute, screening for autism and learning disabilities in that country. And then this is something very recent, which is just looking at inpatient psychiatric care for people with learning disabilities and autism, and whether or not it's effective, safe, and what their experiences are of going into a psychiatric hospital. And then something here about looking at learning channel sets and helping teach autistic students. So these are young kids under the age of 10 who are in special schools, maths properly, and how we use something called precision teaching as a method for helping them to learn mathematics. Okay, just a little bit about some of my PhD students at the minute who are working for me. Some I've just spoke to you about, sort of using imagery, attentional bias modification. I'm just about to launch a national survey of mental health amongst autistic undergraduates and non-autistic undergraduates in England. Some work around deprescribing medications, precision teaching I mentioned. Some work around people who set fires, so arsonists. Some work around parenting interventions for parents of teenagers with learning disabilities, ways to assess educational attainment in special schools, screening, I mentioned in Nigeria, and then some screening tools for autistic women, and then looking at and understanding social information processing in people with autism who've committed crimes. So obviously, as scientists working at a university, we have to get grants to pay for our research. So these are just 11 grants that I have at the minute where I'm either the chief investigator or I'm a co-applicant and collaborator. So there's a whole bunch there, predominantly funded by the National Institute for Health Research. The majority of these are clinical trials where we are testing an intervention in the NHS. So we're trying to generate evidence to show that a treatment works, and hopefully then will become incorporated into NICE guidelines. So just to show you one of these, this is yes, Ishmael.
So do you work like on multiple projects at the same time?
You got it. Absolutely. So yeah, there's 11 of them that are running at the minute. Yeah. So it's quite a busy job, guys, just so you know, but you have teams. So it's not just me. So I've got research staff employed to work on these projects. These are national, and some of them are international trials with teams in other countries. So they're large teams. So you are part of a big group working with others. So it's not just me by any stretch whatsoever. So yeah, so I'll tell you about the solutions trial in a sec, but there's ones around depression, people who have a history of engaging in harmful sexual behavior, looking and understanding services for children in the NHS, developing interventions to treat anxiety in both kids and adults with autism and learning disabilities, working on a project and this project ran in Birmingham actually, which is the RESET study, which was around working with families where there was a young person at risk of committing crimes. Then we got a drug trial where we're testing an antidepressant called serotonin in autistic adults who have anxiety problems. And we got something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a specific type of psychological therapy that involves eye movements for post-traumatic stress disorder. And then we got some projects around helping people to get out of psychiatric hospitals and stay out of hospital. And then that last one there, funded by Nuffield, is very much around helping to encourage the inclusion of people who have disabilities in clinical research, and that's a big project with colleagues together at several universities. So just to explain to you, a clinical trial is an experiment. I'm sure you guys have learned about the experimental method in many of your lectures, or I don't know if you call them lectures anymore actually at school, but your teaching that you have about science, whether it's biology, physics, chemistry, or psychology. The experimental method is empiricism is empiricism. So a clinical trial is nothing but a big fat experiment involving human beings. Okay. If I were to do an experiment that involved, I don't know, bacteria in a lab, still same methodology. So I would be allocating, instead of people, it would be cells or bacterium, or I might be testing responses to various chemicals or whatnot, but in a lab, it's the same method. So this is the Solutions Trial, which is funded by the Youth Endowment Fund, which is a large clinical trial of something called solution-focused brief therapy for children and young people aged 10 to 17 who get arrested and present to a custody suite and that's where you're taken by the police in Lancashire and South Cumbria. So we're going to randomize these kids who want to take part in our study into receive 6 sessions of solution-focused brief therapy versus services as usual. So those are all the other things they're entitled to, they will still get, or they will just get what they're normally entitled to. And we're going to follow them up for a year to see whether or not the additional psychological intervention helps reduce rates of rearrest or further violence. And we randomize participants into which arm. So if you were asked or invited to take part in the Solutions Trial, we would explain to you that you will get randomized. Can't guarantee you're going to get the new therapy. You may just get treatment as usual. That will be decided on a randomized, completely random basis by a computer. And in this instance, we're using something called stratified permuted block randomization. I appreciate that's a mouthful. I don't expect you guys to know what that means. But we want to make sure our 2 groups are equally matched so that any differences in our outcome isn't as a consequence of our groups being poorly matched. So for example, we don't want all the girls in one arm. We want an equal number of boys and girls. We don't want all the people who may have difficulties with reading and communication in one arm. We want them spread between the 2 arms. So we and that's called stratification. So we're using that. And the other thing that we do is we make sure everyone's masked or blind. So that means it's the outcome assessors, the trial statisticians, people responsible for analyzing the data, and the research team, which includes me. I don't get to know who gets which treatment until the end and after the analysis has been done, just to make sure that there's no possibility for undue influence. And that's just to help ensure that our results can be trusted. Okay. So I thought what I'd end with is just a couple of things that came out of my head, guys, about just pearls of wisdom, thoughts, things I've sort of would say about a job like mine. In terms of ideas for research, they very much come from my clinical work and my hands-on work with patients in the NHS and working within teams. So if you want to be a clinical psychologist and you want to be a researcher, it's very important to do both. And the other thing, they come from working with others in big teams. And very much driven by my drive to want to make things better for people and to make a difference and to make sure my research findings are applied and actually hopefully make a difference to the lives of someone. And you have to be quite hardworking, and you have to be focused, and you have to see your ideas through, and you have to say yes a lot, and you have to put your neck out there. And one of the most important things that I've learned probably is to be encouraged, but also encourage others. And you have to have tenacity, so you mustn't give up. And a life as an academic or a scientist, you will frequently encounter rejection. You might not get a grant funded, you might not get your paper published, but you never get down. You never let this stop you. You just have to, it's opportunities to learn. So all of that provides you with an opportunity to, what did I do wrong? Oh my God, I must learn from that. I must make sure I don't do that again. And it's also very important to make sure that you develop and cultivate positive relationships with others and collaborate with teams and with people around the world. And you must reflect and learn from the feedback that you're given, and you must learn to listen carefully to people who are much more experienced than you, who know what they're doing. And that certainly was something that I learned very early on, and worked with very senior people and had lots of opportunity to learn from them. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of stuff that you will encounter if you want to go into a career in science. You must never you must never get put off by that. And you must always be prepared to ask for help, look for opportunities, dive in. And again, you might not be successful, I should say they're not successfully, but you sure will learn a lot and take advantage of opportunities like you are tonight. This is an opportunity, you've taken advantage of it. Well done. And you must always be willing to teach others as you work on your career and your career progresses. And as a clinician, and what is called a clinical academic, so that's someone who works at a university and works as a clinician in the NHS, and it just doesn't apply to psychologists. Their medical doctors are clinical academics as well. Nurses are clinical academics as well. The two go together. They're like bread and butter. So, you know, they are inextricably linked. And embedding research in healthcare is really important, and something that the government for many years has tried to do, establish the National Institute for Health Research. We know that research active hospitals have better patient outcomes. So the more research studies an NHS trust is involved in, it's associated with better outcomes for the patients and improved care overall for the patient. And that's because we're very questioning and we ask those difficult questions and we're prepared to make changes as needed. So just a couple of final things. It's hard work, but there's a lot of reward and it's great fun. And you do get to think outside the box and you do get to solve problems. You get to tackle them head on. You get to create and generate, and that's great fun. And you do get to meet a lot of different people, and that's very rewarding, especially if you're a bit of a people person and you talk a lot, and I can talk a lot. So, and the other thing just to say, working as a scientist, one of the things that's great about it is you do get opportunities to meet people you work with around the world. You get to go to conferences in all kinds of great places, where, you know, all over the world, Finland, Thailand, China, Australia, wherever. That's really great, and you get to see the world as part of your job, and that is a big perk and a big plus. So I had another video, but I won't show it. What I'll do instead is, well, it started to play. I'll just take some questions, guys, and just a big thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I hope that's been encouraging and been helpful, and please ask questions.
Right. Thank you very much. That was great. Guys, if we could have questions in the chat, I will just read them out one by one. I'd like to start off by asking you, who do you think the most important psychologist is of the 21st century?
Oh, crikey. Oh, that's a really hard question, hey? So I can think of both psychologists and psychiatrists potentially, but I think really interesting. So there was a psychologist who was the head of psychology at the Institute of Psychiatry where I trained, and he's no longer with us, but Hans Eisnick. Have you ever heard of Hans Eisnick, guys? If you're doing a psychology A-level.
Is he the personality guy?
He did personality, that's right. He also did cognitive psychology, so had quite an impact on our sort of understanding of cognitive psychology and the importance of cognition or our thoughts and how we process information in that way, which directly informed psychological therapy. There's also was a chap named Jack Rockman who really was also at the Institute of Psychiatry, who then went to work in Canada. You may or may not have learned about him, but he was very much a pioneer of behavioral interventions for the treatment of anxiety disorders, including obsessive compulsive disorder. And then, of course, there is the very famous Aaron Beck, who is actually a psychiatrist, who is one of the founding fathers of cognitive behavioral therapy, which I suspect you may have learned about him. But yeah. And then there's the people who taught me directly, and they're perhaps not in your textbooks, but they were very important, certainly for me. But yeah.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat. Most of the research projects seem to be centered around people with learning disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Is this due to a lack of scope or due to an increased interest in this area?
It's completely because that's what I do for work. So as a clinician, I work in, have always worked in services for people with learning disabilities. So most of my work, but not all of my work, has involved that group. So that's why my research is often about that group. So it's a particular interest of mine.
Why do you have that interest?
It was my first job, and if you train to be a clinical psychologist, you will have to work with people with learning disabilities. It's part of the requirements. And I have family members with autism. So again, though, I thought I'd probably go into neuropsychology rather than what I do. And I think having done my placement in learning disabilities, I enjoyed it so much, I decided it was probably what I wanted to do. And that was my first job. And I could have changed, and moved and worked in another area. But I really liked that job. But within that, I've always worked in forensic mental health. So I have done some work in community learning disabilities teams, but so it's just, I guess, what I like to do. It's a group that, as I don't know how much you know, but it is a group of people who are terribly devalued by our shared society, guys, who are incredibly vulnerable and have, a much greater risk of developing mental health problems for a variety of reasons, but also at much greater risk of having physical health problems. They require a lot of help and support, and many things that are open to us for people who don't have learning disabilities are only available to people with learning disabilities with additional support. So they require a lot of help, and that's something I'm interested in helping with and improving.
Yeah. Ishmael's raised his hand. Do you want to speak?
Someone else typed their question first. So I'll go afterwards.
Okay. What are some of the challenges, if any, that you face as a clinical psychologist?
So the recent challenges have been the pandemic, which really scuppered some of our work. So we couldn't run clinical trials during the pandemic, so we had to stop. And then trying to get things open again was also a real challenge. That was really, really difficult. So that is a real challenge. But in the NHS generally, especially now, it is really hard because there is a chronic staff shortage. People are overworked. It's really hard to get people to take part in research. So clinicians, not necessarily patients, but you do have to work really much harder, I find, certainly, to get things embedded and get things up and running and get things functioning, that's what I would say. So yeah.
Is there a way of classifying someone as a psychopath? Would it be more genetic due to lower levels of serotonin transmission? And the second question is, how is empathy expressed in the brain?
Okay, so those are some great questions. I'm looking on my shelf behind me to see what I can pull off, because it's here somewhere in my office. Oh, there's one, the short version is there. So there you go. So can you guys read that? So that's the hair PCL SV. So that's the psychopathy checklist. So so we can classify someone as a psychopath, and we have a semi-structured interview and a rating scale that we use. This is the short version, just so you can see. So I would undertake a clinical interview with someone. The PCL, so the psychopathy checklist, there is a full version. So the screening version is an initial quick screen to see whether or not I want to do the full version. But we undertake a clinical interview and we look at their history in sum total, all the information we can find out. And there is a rating scale that we use. So you have to be trained to be able to use it. So it's not in the public domain. So you can't get your hands on it, guys, I'm afraid. But so it's only a qualified clinician that can make use of it. So there was a question about the brain. So what we do know is that there is, of course, a genetic component to psychopathy. And during childhood, sometimes that is expressed. So we have to refer to those as callous and unemotional traits. And we know that a proportion of children who had developed or have callous and unemotional traits will go on to fulfill diagnostic criteria for something called conduct disorder. So during their teenage years. And then a proportion of those will go on then to fulfill diagnostic criteria for something called antisocial personality disorder. So psychopathy isn't in ICD-11 as a mental illness or a mental disorder, guys. It's called antisocial personality disorder, of which a lack of guilt or empathy features. So it's part of it. Okay, so psychopathy is a slightly separate construct, but it's related to antisocial personality disorder. And then there was a question about empathy, and I forgot what that exactly was.
How is empathy expressed in the brain?
So that's a question I'm not going to be able to answer off the top of my head, but so there is a specific system that lights up. Okay, so there's a variety of bits of the brain that are involved in our experience of empathy, including our own wonderful amygdala, so parts of the limbic system. And then there are various bits of motor cortex depending on what's going on. But yeah, so there is a social cognition circuit that is involved in aspects of empathy. Okay, and it varies. So, you know, and there's two types of empathy, guys. I don't know how much you know or you've been taught about empathy. So we often conceptualize empathy as having two core component parts. So there's a cognitive part, and that refers to thinking about what someone else is thinking. Okay, so how many of you at some point have watched a film, really sad film, and you cried? Go on, admit it. I bet you have.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I admit it.
Yeah, fair enough. All of us. Someone says nope. So Zach says no. What? I don't believe it, Zach. I bet. Have you ever watched something really sad on the telly or read a sad book, read a sad story, and thought, oh God, that's so sad, and felt a bit choked up?
No.
Watch The Green Mile. It's really sad.
Yeah. Have you guys read the book Marley and Me? Seen the film Marley and Me about the dog? Or was that a little bit before your time? It's not that long ago. Is Zach a psychopath? No, I don't think so. So basically, if you watch a television program, guys, you feel upset. You just feel it. Yeah. Do you sit there and go, I must be upset now. I'll stop like a robot. You know, I'll turn on my emotions. It doesn't work like that. It just happens, doesn't it? So that's called effective empathy. Okay. So have you ever, you guys, you hang around with your friends, you know, say you're at school, you see your friends over there and you go join them and something's not right and you just know it. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever just felt, oh shit, what's going on? Oh no, your body tells you, your emotions tell you something's not right. Okay. So, ever, you know, I'm not saying you've done this, but if you were to walk into somebody's funeral, not related to you, in the middle of a service, guess how you're going to feel? Don't even know the person. How you're going to feel? You will feel what the people around you are feeling. All right. You will begin to feel it. Okay. You can't turn it off, guys. Your body will do it. That's called effective empathy. So we've got cognitive empathy, which is your ability to perspective take in terms of thinking about what other people are thinking. So to be able to read someone's face and just kind of automatically kind of get, oh yeah, he's, you know what they're thinking. The other aspect of that is feeling what someone else is feeling. So your gut does it. So if you think about watching a film on telly that involves something really sad where you get upset and you want to cry, you know, you feel it coming. So it's not real. These are people pretending. These are actors getting paid a wad of cash to act for you. And guess what? They're so good, they've tricked your brain into thinking their emotion is genuine. So this is what happens. You see someone's emotion. Like if you see a family, so you bring it a bit home, a bit closer. Your mum's crying, you're probably going to cry. Your sister, someone in your family's upset, you're going to feel it. You see what I mean? And that's the effective empathy. So it's those two together that's what we talk about empathy. Okay. So the word sometimes we use is visceral. So that means in your body. So it's your body is affected by an affective state. That's also called, we also call effective empathy effective resonance. Do you know what the word resonance means? Resonating. You know, like, you know, in music, you got tuning forks that resonate when you tap down a particular frequency. So effective resonance is in physics, absolutely. So effective resonance is about your body's ability to tune in to the emotions of other people automatically. So you resonate, you feel what they feel. Okay. So what we know about psychopathy, guys, psychopaths struggle with that effective resonance. They struggle with that. But what they're really good at is working out what you're thinking, because it can be really good at manipulating people. Okay, so they can work out what you're thinking, they can work out what's going on, and they may be quite manipulative, all right, to get what they want. So they may trick you into, you know, giving over your bank account details and getting all your cash. Okay, so they may be very skilled at deception. All right, yes, Ismail.
Okay, so I know during our lessons we've been learning about psychologists of old, such as Milgram, Ash, and like Zimbardo, and they all did very, very controversial experiments that but because of those experiments, we've learnt a lot from. I want to know if nowadays, because there are a lot of ethical guidelines in place in how to conduct an experiment, whether or not in like the field of psychology we are actually making like any sort of significant advancements without these.
I mean, I think the answer is yes, we are making significant advancements all the time. However, there are some things that obviously have been done in the past which you wouldn't be permitted to do perhaps today, but there are some things that happened in the past that you would be permitted to use today. For example, an ethics committee may agree, for example, to allow you to use a certain aspect of deception in an experiment, where disclosing what you're really doing is going to mean that you can't fundamentally do the experiment. So as long as the risk of harm to participants is pretty low, you could probably include an element of deception, but you would have to get the ethics committee to agree to that. You would have to debrief them after to explain what you did and make sure it's okay, but some of those things can still be okay, Ishmael.
I had a question.
Okay, thanks.
How far do you agree with Kohlberg's theory that morality develops in 6 stages? How relevant do you think that is today?
Yeah, so that's I know Kohlberg very well, so maybe I should tell you guys. So Lawrence Kohlberg, obviously, was an American who committed suicide. I don't know if you guys knew that. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
You did? So I know. So at the time, he was due to get married. And actually, that was a psychologist I should have said, actually, who's inspired me. Lawrence Kohlberg is one of them, actually. And John Gibbs, who also does a lot of morality work, and he's at Ohio State. But I'm good friends with Lawrence Kohlberg's to-be wife at the time. So he was due to get married. So I know who was also a psychologist who works in New York now. Yeah, so so his work is quite close to me because I'm friends with his fiance, who was his fiance, unfortunately, and they were due to get married, but unfortunately he was ill and took his own life. So Kohlberg published 6 stages of moral development. So we progress from very immature, egocentric. You guys know what the word egocentric means?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you prioritize your own needs and only understand and are able to see your own needs. For example, decentration or decentering, being able to adopt another person's perspective begins to happen as we grow up from children. So there have been some criticisms of Lawrence's work. So specifically, some of the higher moral developmental stages do not exist across all cultures around the world, for example. So John Gibbs, who is a developmental psychologist at Ohio State, has reworked Lawrence Kohlberg's theory into a social-moral theory of moral development. And I'm looking at my shelf because there's some of these books are here somewhere, and I've got too many books on my shelf and I'm not going to see them. But John published a 4-stage model of moral development based very much on Lawrence Kohlberg's work, and that has been shown to, in terms of developing through those 4 stages, has been shown to have cross-cultural utility. So it seems like it doesn't really matter where you grow up in the world, you progress to those 4 stages. So some of the very high stages that Lawrence talked about in his work were very much associated with or related to level of educational attainment. So they were frequently seen amongst university graduates. So what John did was, so that's fine, that's okay, but what John did was got rid of some of those higher stages and just worked on the 4 stages, potentially showing that they exist in Israel when kids grow up, America, Canada, the United Kingdom, European countries, and not just European countries.
Yeah. Have you done studies to do with psychopathy, and do you think Hare's checklist is reliable?
So there is lots of research looking at Hare's checklist and the PCL, and yes, it is thought to be reliable by and large, and yes, we have. So I have a particular interest in psychopathy when it co-occurs with autism. So just to explain, so I was telling you about people with psychopathy may have difficulties with affective resonance. You don't necessarily have those problems in autism. So people with autism have problems with cognitive empathy. So thinking what other people are thinking, they still feel what other people are feeling. Do you see what I mean? So it's the other way around. So what happens when you got both? What happens when you got autism and psychopathy? Because it's possible. Okay. So we've been doing some work on that group, and we're interested in that group in terms of what happens in terms of outcomes.
Yeah. Do you think Venables and Thompson knew like whether they were being moral
Say
or
that.
not when they did
Say
their
that.
when they committed their crimes? Do you think Venables and Thompson knew what they were doing was wrong?
Who did you? Who is that?
John Venables and Robert Thompson. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Oh, John Venables. Yes. Yeah. That's a good question. I can't tell you because I haven't interviewed them. So yeah. So obviously, in order to, there are different types of crimes and different reasons for crimes, but young people who grow up and begin to, engage in criminal offending behavior, you would expect to see a more developmental delay as a consequence. That could be causal, but also will be affected by, some of the experiences that you have developmentally. And it's your ability, if you will, to understand other people's point of view and also to feel what other people are feeling, guys. So guilt and empathy are very important.
Yeah.
So just so you know, so generally there are meta-analyses. Remember I was talking about meta-analyses? So getting all the different studies and putting them together. There are lots of studies looking at, do people who commit crimes have problems with empathy? The answer is pretty much, generally, yeah, some do. It does vary. It's not always consistent, but yeah, you do see that.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have any further questions? Ishmael.
So you said that you don't really know because you didn't like interview them. Who's like the most interesting person that you've like interviewed like that then?
Well, I can't really tell you, I'm afraid, Ishmael, because of what I do for a living, I'm afraid. So I do apologize for that. But yeah, so that would be breaking confidentiality and I'd get myself into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But I take your question. It's an interesting question. Yeah, but yeah. So Ishan is asking, can you tell us symptoms? Symptoms of?
I think he means
Symptoms of?
psychopathy.
Oh, the most
Oh.
interesting person that I've interviewed. I can talk very generally, guys. So people with very severe mental illness, for example, people with schizophrenia or psychosis. So there are clusters of symptoms that you do see. And this is not necessarily specific to anyone, but so there's a particular type of syndrome that you sometimes see in schizophrenia called Capgras. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. You probably haven't. No. So that's when somebody has a very delusional belief that the people around them have been replaced by clones. So for example, it's me, it looks like me, but it's not really me because I've been replaced by clones. So when these clones are out to harm you or get you, and you do see that. So you see that consistent delusion sometimes in that mental illness, but people who've never met each other. So it is quite an interesting delusion, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for attending and giving the talk. Is amazing. Yeah. If you could send me some of the links you've put in your PowerPoints, I can forward them to people who've joined the talk.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
Thanks guys for your attention. I really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed the talk, and I hope you all want to be clinical psychologists now. Come join us.
Thank you. You really inspired us.
Come join us.
Thank
We
you
need
very
some more
much.
of you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I'm just going to say that, especially men. I'll be honest. We really need men in clinical psychology. There's very few of us.
Why do you say that?
Me soon, hopefully.
So it's changed over the years, guys. So it used to be quite often a profession that was very male dominated. It isn't anymore. It's mostly women who are training to be clinical psychologists now. And to be honest, it's often, and I'm going to say this, but it's often white middle class women. So we need people from diverse communities, we need people from different backgrounds, and we need men.
Do you know any reasons why at the moment is mainly women?
I don't know. Because I guess maybe it's seen as you're talking to people a lot. It's not that you're doing a lot of science actually. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, guys.